I'm John Bennett, Roll Call's White House correspondent. Today I'm at the Center for a New American Security with Paul Scharre, a former Pentagon official, former Army Ranger who did multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're going to discuss something that got lost in the tidal wave of news recently out of the White House. On April 13th, the president told reporters he had given total authorization to his military commanders. That's the same day that U.S. forces in Afghanistan dropped what's known as the mother of all bombs on an extremist cell in Afghanistan. Today, Paul and I will discuss what we know and what we don't know about President Trump's involvement in these combat decisions. I wanted to start with what is our interpretation of the president's comment and his involvement. The White House won't explain it. They won't explain it to me and other reporters. They won't explain it to armed services, senior members of both armed services committees. Where is the president in all of this, based on what we know?
Well, I think the specifics of exactly what the relationship the president has with his military commanders are unclear. That statement is really Trump speak for saying that he's going to delegate more authority, and he's willing to step away from some of the micromanaging that we saw during the Obama administration, and he's going to give military commanders free rein. And I think this is really consistent with a pattern we've seen with President Trump in a short time in office and beforehand as a businessman in delegating authority to people and then holding them responsible. He's certainly not afraid to fire people if he's unhappy with them.
What do we know about how involved the president is? Republicans like John McCain and others told me the president is still involved, especially on strategic decisions, but this is a change at the tactical level.
I think we don't know. Now, and that's a little bit concerning because, of course, the president can't absolve himself of the responsibility as commander-in-chief for military operations. So regardless of whether he's asking to be informed, whether he's asking to see the maps and know what's going on, it is still his responsibility. The buck does stop with him. And one of the troubling dynamics here is that we've seen in the past when things have gone awry, as they did in a special operations raid back in January, when a Navy SEAL was killed, that the president has basically taken himself out of the loop and said, well, it's not my fault, it's the general's fault. And so he's sort of looked to avoid responsibility. But he can't. He is the commander-in-chief, regardless of how engaged he is or not.
Operations go wrong in the future. You mentioned one that went tragically wrong. Does that hurt Trump, especially with his base here at home?
I think at the tactical level, we're likely to see more military successes. If the president is delegating more authority, the military commanders will feel freer to do what makes sense on the ground, operationally against the enemy. There are some areas where there might be some risks, for example, in perhaps more civilian casualties.
We've already seen an uptick.
We have seen, right? For example, in bombings in Iraq and Mosul. Now, I don't know that really, the president's going to pay a cost for that with his base, right? There also is a greater risk of instances that go wrong where we see U.S. service members killed. When you put people in harm's way, sometimes harm befalls them. Right. Again, I'm not sure that the president will pay a price there with his base, that they may be willing to accept some of those costs in U.S. service member lives or civilian casualties if they're seeing more progress against ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other groups.
We haven't heard the president talk a lot about that until his trip, especially his speech to Muslim leaders in Saudi Arabia. He seemed to start to lay the groundwork for exactly that political piece that would come behind what this uptick in drone strikes and special ops missions. Do you think there is the policy bandwidth, so to speak, in the Trump administration to do what the Bush administration, the Obama administration could not do?
The president's advisors, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, National Security Advisor General McMaster, they have the ability, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, they have the ability to understand these nuanced political dynamics. However, reaching a lasting political solution is going to require coordination among the White House from these elements. It's going to require presidential leadership. I'm not sure right now that the White House is organized enough, the president's engaged enough, and then he actually understands the nuances of these international dynamics enough to get to a place where we can solve some of the political problems. You know, this is the downside of just a focus on killing, extremists and killing terrorists. What replaces them? What's the political structure that holds up in Mosul?
Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.